Star worshipping. When the Arabs were still in ignorance, worshipping stars was very common. Historians have no substantial proof if Arabia, Egypt, Greece or Persia were the first to institute the worship of stars or if they came to it separately. However, it is hard to imagine that worshipping stars came to Arabia from outside. The sun was worshipped by Himyar tribe, the moon by the Kanana, Dharan by Tamim, Jupiter by the Lokman Judharn, Suhail by the Tai, Shera by the Kays and Mercury by the Asad. Most of the tribal idols were named with the names of stars. Stone idols and noted stars were worshipped commonly by different tribes. They often based their important affairs on the rising and setting of certain stars. It is not surprising that the people passing their days and nights in open fields and deserts had their attention focused on the stars and planets and acknowledging some of them as their deities. From Surat Na of the Quran it comes to light that even during the era of Na and Ji, Iraqi Arabs worshipped Yagath, Ya'ak, Wad, Nasr, and Suwa, which are all named after stars. It makes it very clear that star worship in Arabia was a very old affair. The moon was worshipped more than any other object. Soothsaying. Soothsayers were found in large number in Arabia. Aqdin was one who claimed to have information about the unseen events of the past, while those giving information of the future were called Ara. Both men and women claimed knowledge of the unseen. Among the soothsayers of Arabia, Afa, Jadima, Abrash, Shak and Sadi were well known. Another kind of soothsayer was known as Nazir. They could tell about the unseen by focusing their eyes on a mirror or on a tray of water. They included casters of pebbles and the pits of fruit. They all belonged to the same category, but they were ranked below the soothsayers, while those making amulets were considered the lowest. Omens. The Arabs also believed in good and bad omens. They held crows to be very inauspicious and something that causes separation. Since the crow is called Gurub in Arabic, they called traveling as Gurbet, and the traveler as Garib, as according to them, the influence of a crow causes separation and causes man to suffer the hardships of traveling. An owl was also very unlucky to them, for its hooting cries, they believed, caused death and destruction. Sneezing also carried an ill omen to them. Some of them were sorcerers, and they dealt in sorcery and performed heavy exercises to befriend Satan. Fighting. Fighting would break out over petty matters and insignificant incidents. Once hostilities began, they could linger on for several generations and even centuries. Most of their fighting started without any substantial reason. There were more than 100 feuds during the days of ignorance in Arabia that were famous. For instance, Buath, Kilab, Fatrat, Nakhla, Karn, Subban and Hadib were the names of well-known feuds. No tribe ever benefited from these feuds, they only suffered destruction and the loss of life and property. They had an old practice of putting to death the women and children of the defeated enemy after taking them prisoner. However, if a person had eaten from their food or had received hospitality from them previously, they were safe from being killed. They would shave the heads of those whom they released. Most disputes would be settled by a challenge to single combat. They took special care of their horses and weapons. The battle array of armies was not in practice. Anyone achieving perfection in swordmanship, archery, cavalry, or fighting with lances was held in high esteem, and his name and reputation would quickly spread far and wide. Some particular tribes gained distinction in the use of some particular weapon. They had special names for weapons, swords, bows and horses, which were famous throughout the land. For instance, the name of the sword of Harth bin Abu Shimr Ghassani was Qudam, while the sword of Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim was called Atzhan, and that of Malik bin Zubair was Dun Nun. These evidences let us know that the people of Arabia had a great zest for fighting and killing. This is the reason behind thousands of names. Given to horses and swords in Arabic. Illicit sex. Arabs in the age of ignorance had no custom of observing hijab, covering of women, and their women would come freely before strange men. The lack of the necessities of life and other time-consuming affairs, an irresponsible sense of freedom over indulgence. In poetic composition, their assertion of pride and superiority, and the hot climate of the country was enough to instigate this tendency. Anyone who never fell in love with a strange woman was disrespected. Some tribes were renowned for their love-making. Banu Adra's love gained so much celebrity and renown that it became proverbial, that is, so-and-so is a lover greater than Banu Adra. Someone asked a Bedouin which tribe did he belong to. He replied that he was from a tribe that when they fall in love they pass away. A girl heard it and remarked, "By the Lord of Kaaba, you are from Banu Adra." Superstition and credulity. They believed in the existence of jinns, demons and fairies. They also believed that fairies could fall in love with human males, and jinn could form physical contacts with human females. Although they considered jinn as invisible creature, they believed that the union of the material and immaterial could bear babies. The Arabs believed that Jurham was born as a result of union between a human and an angel. This was their belief also about the Queen Bilqis of Saba, Queen of Sheba. About Umar bin Yarbu, they thought that he was born with the union of a human and a fairy. The she-camel bearing 5 calves and the 5th being a male, was called Bahira, and they left it free by piercing its ears. She was at liberty to go and graze anywhere and nobody objected to it. In case any sheep bore a male, it was offered to the idols, and if it happened to be female, they kept it for themselves. In case of a male and female, they held back from sacrificing them and called them wasila. The male camel that had fathered 10 calves was held in great honor. They neither loaded it nor made it a mount and left it free like a bull. It was called ham. They used to keep 3 arrows before the idols or at the threshold of the temples. They wrote la, no, on one arrow and naam, yes, on another. The third would be blank. In case of any problem they would take out 1 arrow from the quiver. If the arrow with la written on it came out, they dropped the plan of doing what they wanted, and if the arrow showing naam was picked, they thought themselves permitted to do whatever they had planned. If the blank arrow came out, they continued the exercise until the arrow with either la or naam came out. While setting out on a journey they would tie a knot on a thin branch of a certain type of tree called rattan. On coming back they would notice whether the knot was intact or untied. If they found the knot untied, they believed that their wives must have committed adultery while they were away. At the death of a person, his she-camel was fastened to his grave with her eyes closed until she died there, or the head of the she-camel was pulled towards her breast and tied to it, and they would left her until she died. It was done in accordance with the belief that the dead person, when raised from his grave, would find the she-camel and have it as his mount. They believed that if a person went to a settlement and was afraid of an epidemic there, he would be saved if he cried loudly like an ass standing at the gate of the settlement. When the number of camels in one's possession would reach more than 1,000, he would take out both the eyes of the bull among them to save all the other camels from calamity. When a camel would develop mange, the healthy one, instead of the sick, was branded with the belief that the sick one would restore its health. The famous poet Nabiga says in his couplet, "You left the stranger and loaded his burden upon me, as they leave the camel suffering from mange and brand the healthy camel grazing peacefully instead." Similarly, they would beat the ox if a cow refused to drink water. They believed that the ox was possessed by a jinn who would stop the cows from drinking water. They believed that if the killer of someone went unpunished, a bird named Hama would come out of the skull of the dead person and would go on crying, give me water," until the crime was avenged. They believed that some person had a snake in his stomach, and when it was hungry it would tear and eat away the flesh from the ribs of the person. They had a belief that if the children of a woman kept dying, they could be saved from dying if the woman concerned trampled the dead body of a noble and wealthy person with her feet. They also believed that the jinn feared rabbits, and so they suspended rabbit bones from the neck of their children to keep them safe from the ill effect of the jinn. Killing of daughters. The custom of killing their daughters was rampant among the Banu Tamim and the Quraysh. They took pride in killing their daughters, and it was for them a status symbol. This heartlessness reached such a height in some tribes that when the daughter became 5 or 6 years old and start uttering sweet words, the stone-hearted father would take her in beautiful garments to a place outside his settlement where he had already dug a deep ditch. He would then make his daughter stand beside the ditch and then push her into the ditch, stoning her to death while she called for her father's help. No screaming and crying could melt his heart, and he would return after filling the ditch. They took pride in burying their daughters alive. Qays bin Asim, a man from Banu Tamim, buried his 10 daughters alive in this manner. Although no tribe of Arabia was free from this inhuman custom, some tribes did it more than others. Gambling. The Arabs were very fond of gambling too. They gambled with arrows which had no feathers. They were 10 in number, and their names in order were 1. Gad, 2. Tawam, 3. Rakib, 4. Nf, Ifis, 5. Hals, 6. Mahal, 7. Mwala, 8. Fasi, 9. Mani and 10. Wagd. Each of them had its own share. For instance, Gad had 1, Taf, Im had 2, and Rakib had 3, and it kept increasing in this way till Mwala had 7 shares, while the last 3 arrows had no share. 10 wealthy persons would buy fat goats and divide them into 28 shares. The arrows would be handed to a designated person who would take out and give each person an arrow one by one, and each person got his share according to his arrow's share. They played such games of chance before Hubal at the Kaaba. Another form of gambling was that they collected some sand and hid something in it. Then after dividing the sand into 2 heaps they asked the players to tell in which heap was the hidden object. The one who guessed it correctly was declared the winner, and those guessing incorrectly were declared as the losers.